Throughout our lives, we have read countless books and history, religion, science, stories, and many other subjects. But have you ever heard about a book that has been described as one of the most mysterious and dangerous books in the world? Imagine a manuscript that has remained surrounded by mystery of nearly 7 centuries. According to legend, it may even have been created with the help of devil himself. Stories surrounding this mysterious book claim that some people who came into contact with it suffered a strange psychological experience, lost their sanity, or even met tragic end. There are almost legends describing readers who supposedly saw the letters moving or appearing to burn, surrounded by strange flames as if the words themselves had come alive. This isn't simply a fictional horror story. The manuscript actually exists. It is a genuine medieval manuscript that has survived for hundreds of years and is now preserved in Europe. Historians, researchers, and scholars from around the world have studied it extensively. Yet, one question continues to capture people's imagination. Could the devil really have been involved in creating a book? The story of manuscript is so unusual that separating historical facts from centuries-old legends can be difficult. According to one famous legend, the entire manuscript was written in just a single night. However, researchers who have examined the book believe that such a fate would have been virtually impossible. If one person had written the entire manuscript by hand, working continuously, it could have required decades. Some estimates suggest around 20 to 25 years, while others place the figure closer to 30 or even 35 years. And there is another remarkable detail. The manuscript wasn't written on ordinary paper. Its pages were made from an animal hide or parchment, traditionally associated with animal skins. Historical estimates suggested that approximately 160 animal hides may have been needed to create enough parchment for the enormous book. So, how could something so massive possibly have been completed in one night? That question lies at the heart of the mystery. The manuscript is known today as the Devil's Bible, while its historical name is Codex Gigas. Most people are familiar with the Holy Bible, the sacred sculpture of Christianity. But this enormous medieval manuscript became famous under a very different name because of the strange legend surrounding its creation and the enormous illustration of devil contained within its pages. So, what exactly is Codex Gigas? Who created it? Why was it written? How did the legend of the single night begin? And most importantly, was the devil really involved? Let's uncover the story step by step. And you're watching Glumora Echoes. First, we need to understand just how extraordinary this manuscript actually is. Codex Gigas is a gigantic medieval manuscript containing hundreds of pages of parchment. Instead of being made from modern paper, its pages were produced from animal skins. Based on historical estimates, around 160 animal hides may have been required to create the parchment used for the entire manuscript. The book is enormous. It measures approximately 36 inches in height and around 20 inches in wide and roughly 8 inches thick. It weighs somewhere in the range of 75 to 85 kilograms. Because of that extraordinary weight, carrying the manuscript is certainly not an easy task for a single person. Every pages were written by hand, and one of the manuscript's most fascinating characteristics is the remarkable consistency of its handwriting. This brings us to the central mystery once again. How could one person possibly have produced such an enormous manuscript in a single night? To understand where this legend came from, we have to travel back to the 13th century. According to the traditional story, a saint was living in a monastery located in the region that is now part of the Czech Republic. At some point, saint committed a serious violation of the rules governing his religious order. His actions were considered extremely serious because they had brought shame upon the monastery and violated the strict regulations that saints were expected to obey. Eventually, the matter came to the attention of the king, and the investigation was carried out, and the saint was found guilty.
Spy on the saint. Yes, my lord.
The punishment described in different versions of the legend was extremely severe. Some versions claim that he was sentenced to be walled up alive, while others describe him as being imprisoned in a coffin placed until his death. Either way, according to the legend, his fate appeared to be sealed. But the saint supposedly made one final request. He begged for an opportunity to save himself. He promised the king that he could create an extraordinary book, one that would benefit humanity and bring eternal glory to the monastery, whose reputation he had damaged. The king eventually accepted the proposal, but there was one condition. The saint had to complete the entire book in the single night. If he succeeded, his punishment would be lifted. If he failed, his sentence would remain. The saint accepted the challenge. As night fell, he began working. He had access to ink, parchment, and the materials necessary to create the manuscript. He continued writing hour after hour, but as the night progressed, he began to realize the impossible scale of the task before him. Midnight passed. The more hours disappeared. Morning was approaching, and the enormous manuscript was nowhere near finished.
It must be done now, before it's too late. The darkness closes in.
The saint knew that if he failed, he would face the punishment that had been waiting for him. According to the legend, desperation eventually drove him to take a supernatural approach. Sometime after midnight, he supposedly performed a ritual and called upon the devil. He made a desperate bargain. The saint asked the devil to help him finish the enormous manuscript before sunrise. In exchange, he supposedly offered his soul.
I summon thee, demon of the abyss. Arise and heed my call.
Who dares summon me?
I seek a favor, a pact.
What is your price, mortal?
According to the legend, the devil agreed, and then something extraordinary supposedly happened. When the morning arrived, the saint found the enormous manuscript completed before him. The impossible task had apparently been accomplished. The manuscript would eventually become known as the Devil's Bible or Codex Gigas, but the contents of the book were not limited to religious material. The manuscript contains religious writings, historical information, medical knowledge, and various other texts. However, one image within the manuscript became particularly famous. It is a large, full-page illustration depicting the devil. The manuscript also contains illustrations connected to both heavenly and earthly themes, including repetitions of the sun and moon. Because of striking devil illustration and the supernatural legends surrounding the manuscript's creation, Codex Gigas eventually became widely known as the Devil's Bible. But according to the legend, the story had an even darker ending. It is said that after completing the manuscript, the saint's soul was taken by devil, and that the saint eventually died. When the king's representative arrived the following morning, they supposedly discovered the completed book. From that moment onward, stories about the strange manuscript began spreading. Over the centuries, various legends developed around it. Some stories claim that people who attempted to read the manuscript experienced unusual psychological effects. Other tales suggested that the letters appear to move, glow, or become surrounded by flames. Some people even claim to have witnessed frightening images or experienced strange sensations while looking through its pages. As these stories spread, the manuscript gradually became associated with supernatural events, misfortune, and dark legends. But eventually, historians and researchers began asking a much more practical question. Could one human being really have written the entire manuscript in a single night? The handwritten became one of the most important clues. The writing throughout much of the manuscript is remarkably consistent. This has led some researchers to suggest that a single scribe may indeed have produced a significant portion or perhaps nearly all of the manuscript. But even if only one person was responsible, the amount of work involved presents an enormous problem. Writing hundreds of large parchment pages by hand would have required an incredible amount of time. Researchers have estimated that producing a manuscript of this scale could have taken many years of continuous work. Some estimates put the required time at around 2 decades, while other calculated suggest an even longer period. Compared with that, the legendary single night completion became almost impossible to imagine, and the impossible claims is one of the main reasons Codex Gigas became so famous. Over the years, the manuscript has inspired numerous other theories as well. Some conspiracy theories have attempted to connect it with secret organization, hidden messages, mysterious symbols, or secret codes. However, these ideas belong largely to the world of conspiracy theories and folklore rather than established historical evidence. What we do know is that manuscript itself is completely real. Throughout its long history, Codex Gigas has traveled between different locations and passed through the hands of various owners and institutions. Today, it is preserved in Sweden, where it is treated as an important historical artifact. For centuries, scholars have examined the manuscript from numerous perspectives. They have studied its handwriting, parchment, illustrations, historical journey, contents, and circumstances surrounding its creation. Yet, even after all these research, some fascinating questions remained. Was Codex Gigas actually written by a single person? If so, how many years did that person spend creating it? Was the story about the devil simply a medieval legend invented to explain a manuscript that seemed almost impossible to create? Or how could there be some part of story that history has yet to fully explain? The most reasonable conclusion is that the manuscript itself is authentic, while many of the supernatural stories surrounding it remains unproven. The enormous manuscript is real. The famous illustration of the devil is real. The unusual consistency of the handwriting is real. But there is no established historical evidence proving that the devil himself helped create the book. The supernatural elements remains part of the legend. And perhaps that is exactly what makes Codex Gigas so fascinating. It isn't simply an old book. It is a remarkable piece of medieval history wrapped in centuries of mystery, religious symbolism, legends, speculation, and unanswered questions. So, that was the story of Devil's Bible, the legendary manuscript said to have been created after a desperate saint supposedly made a bargain with the devil, offering his soul in exchange for completing an impossible book before sunrise. Whether you believe the legend or view it simply as a fascinating medieval tale, one fact cannot be denied: Codex Gigas really exists. And even after hundreds of years, its extraordinary history continues to capture the imaginations of people around the world. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you again in another fascinating story. And keep watching Gloomer Eye Coach.